Brawl, for all its faults, was a very interesting fighting game to consider. Because of the lack of hit stun, punishes were restricted to minimal few hit combos, meaning matches would constantly revert back to neutral between intimate interactions. Rather than one player remaining on the disadvantage for extended periods of time due to combos, Brawl was more like a series of micro-situations that occurred one after the other, requiring each player to properly read or prepare for the opponent's chosen retaliation each time. This was incredibly mentally exhaustive, and something that top Brawl players don't receive anywhere near enough credit for. One such micro-situation that is consistent across every Smash game, however, is the ledge. A situation where one player has majority stage control while the other is backed into a corner. For such an incredibly important aspect of the game, I see a staggeringly low amount of information on how to approach it. I've seen a few videos and articles here and there, but nothing major. One such video is Rush Hour Smash's Smash Theory episode on edgeguarding. It touches on a few concepts, but it does tend to take a more general view. I'd recommend checking it out regardless. Today we're going to look at player intentions in both the dominant and diminished roles, focusing on what you need to conceptualize in order to get into your opponent's head and either keep them in a vulnerable position or get yourself out of one. We'll also be looking at good Sheik options in these situations and what they can lead to. So, first of all, let's consider stage control. While it's not as clear-cut as this, the amount of stage that's within your control can be seen as the amount of space that's behind you. You share the whole stage with the opponent, and you both act as your own barriers. Having more stage behind you allows more movement space, giving you a wider array of options to handle a situation. If you have more stage in your possession, you have the ability to back off to induce passive play, or to get away from and zone an opponent that has a threatening state, such as limit break. You have a great amount of ranges to use for spacing, allowing for better and safer play. The overall message to take away from this is that you don't need to deal damage in order to gain an advantage. Stage control and positioning is arguably more important than current percent when deciphering who has the advantage in any one situation. Let's look at the following scenario. Sheik at 40% has total stage control, while Bayo up here is on 20%. Right off the bat, Sheik has the initial small advantage here. Bayo needs to spend resources in order to stay at her current position, and will eventually be forced to return to the ground. If Sheik is smart here and has a decent punish game, her advantage here extends much further than initially perceived. Bayo dive kicks here, due to the high reward of the move and its safety on shield. Sheik is aware that many Bayos like going for dive kick in this situation, so she spot dodges, causing Bayo to land with lag. Sheik is able to get a very good punish to bring Bayo's percent above hers. Despite appearing to have the disadvantage in the previous situation, Sheik's positioning proved to be the most valuable attribute of that interaction. Adding on to this, Sheik was able to consider mindset changes and habitual actions that are prompted by specific stage locations and scenarios. What I mean by this is that because Bayo was in this mid-air diagonal range, Sheik realized that Bayo might have a habitual tendency to dive kick when within said range. Speaking of specific mindset changes, the ledge is one such area where players are prompted to enact changes in behavior, usually subconsciously through how we associate stimuli with certain outcomes. This can be seen through how we react to visual signals. Typically, most people associate pointed objects with pain, due to their potential ability to puncture soft, permeable objects like balloons, cloth, and human flesh. The colour green is synonymous with positivity and moving forward, whereas red brings up feelings of negativity and stopping. This is why our traffic signs are coloured the way they are. This is simple stuff, but is important to know in order to realise areas where this association may not be so obvious. The ledge is an area that doesn't have any overt stimuli like colour, but instead prompts reactions through the meaning that we attach to it. While by no means the definitive way of looking at it, each stage is divided into two zones. This middle area is generally considered safe and where players want to be most of the time, due to its equal distance away from all blast zones. As you extend further out towards the perimeter, areas become more and more negative due to their increased proximity to negative zones like being off stage and eventually the blast zones. Being anywhere near this area is a stressful situation. Your stage control is cut down significantly, you have limited area to space, your opponent is pressuring you, you have no Estus Flask left, and the boss is winding up. That's what it can be like when you're on the edge. As we get closer to the negative zones of the stage, our desire to return to the positive zones increases, which influences our choices when put into these zones. When put onto the ledge, the most common habitual action for players is to roll towards the stage. This is because it's our most direct and safest method of getting closer to the middle of the stage. It's done out of a defensive option, it's fast, has invulnerability, and doesn't force us into the air. Another common choice of action here is to jump out, as while it's not invulnerable, it still gets us away from this negative area. These habits are often done automatically, or without thinking, and are usually formed at lower levels of play as they aren't punished properly by players at that level. Remember that Mr. R vs Neotono match analysis I did that no one watched? Even at this level of play, Neotono's biggest weakness in his match was his habit of rolling towards the stage whenever he was cornered. Another way to look at this is from an option-oriented standpoint. When in the middle of the stage, you have the largest amount of options available to your character, as you can freely move both forwards and backwards. When up against a ledge, however, you cannot exert backwards moving options due to falling off the stage. Therefore, the opponent's most likely movement is forwards, and our most defensive method of moving forwards is again, rolling. This isn't just to do with being on the stage either. A hugely common reaction to being hit off stage is to immediately jump back, as this takes you upward and away from the blast zone. This can be easily exploited by simply covering the jump option every time your opponent is hit off stage. These habitual actions are extremely exploitable and incredibly detrimental to your game if you don't realize you're doing them, but usually disappear once you're made aware of these tendencies. So, with all this stated, let's take a look at both offensive and defensive scenarios and what are the main factors to remember. When stuck in the corner, always keep it in the back of your mind not to roll. Good players will always be ready to punish these due to being aware of common player tendencies. You want to observe your opponent when stuck here and find a way to make it pass them through how they're pressuring you. Commonly, good opponents will throw walls of aerials in order to impede progress, which can be countered by good timing. If they expect offense, they'll shield often between pressuring, which is your key to reversing the situation. Look for patterns in their play. Here, this opponent shields every time after applying short segments of pressure, meaning you can make the decision with confidence to grab. Since you're stuck stationary on the ledge, charging needles is an efficient use of time here. This also prompts the opponent to come in and prevent the charging, allowing you to fake them out and escape or reversal. Burst Grenade is surprisingly not a bad option here, as even if the opponent gets in, they'll likely suffer the grenade for it. Just don't use it at hypersense. Jumping into Bouncing Fish is generally a good, hard-to-punish option of escape, but will become readable if you do it every time. Don't become reliant on it, and use it as a trump card after every other option hasn't worked. Additionally, if the opponent has locked you down, jumping may become your worst option here, as it moves yourself closer to the blast zones. For example, your opponent has read your roll every time in the past, and they decide to exact some very up-close pressure. By doing this, they're squeezing you into choosing jumping, as they've discouraged your use of roll and taken almost all stage control. The air is the only area that has breathing space, but a good player will have been leading to this all along. Another good way of visualizing this is by looking at when an opponent is cornered by a V-trigger Dalsim. There's negativity on the floor and corner, jumping is the most obvious way out, but Dalsim is kind of built for this. When you're on the offense against someone on the ledge, you should always be ready for the roll. If you're unsure what your opponent does when put into this situation, space yourself so that you can apply pressure while also being able to jump back and reactionary catch a roll. Just jumping back in between pressure, non-reactionary, is a good way to catch rolls that you wouldn't react to. Walling with aerials is punishable as I pointed out earlier, but is great for putting up a barrier between the opponent and the rest of the stage. Good options to choose here are Fair, which has good range, is relatively safe and connects into larger punishes when connected. Bear, which has a longer range than Fair and sends opponents at a lower angle. Other good choices are F-tilt for safe grounded pressure and down tilt for the same reason. Jab is great to stop grabs and other larger startup attacks. Moving closer to your opponent can prompt them to roll towards the stage, as they're threatened by your close proximity and believe that you're too far to punish their rolling option. This is true for opponents on the ledge as well. Overall, those are the main areas of stimuli and situational association in regards to the ledge that I hope people conceptualize from this video. I've had to explain this concept to a few people before, so I hope this helps anyone craving the same information. Just remember, all the stuff I've covered is nowhere near everything you need to know about this. There is so much more of this theory to dig into in all aspects of the game, which is pretty fun and interesting to explore. I just hope this helps people in this area and gets people thinking about match scenarios and ways that can help them improve. Regardless, thanks for watching.